Hello my friends, and welcome to the channel for another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. This time with a look at a Paladin Warlock multiclass that lets you smash down enemies with an extremely powerful Divine Smite that uses your level 5 Warlock spell slots, meaning you can reset this powerful ability after each combat with a simple short rest. I got about 100 comments on my last Warlock video telling me I needed to try a multiclass build with the Warlock and Paladin, so I figured it would be fun to take a look and see what the hype was all about. The basics of this build are very simple. You need 2 levels in Paladin so you can unlock the ability to Smite, which infuses your melee attack with divine magic, and the power of the Smite increases by using higher level spell slots. By unlocking Smite and then putting all of your remaining levels into Warlock, you will eventually end up with 2 level 5 spell slots out of the Warlock class that you can use with the Divine Smite ability after every short rest. While Paladins do also end up getting higher level spell slots, Warlocks will get the level 5 spell slots, and the important difference here is that the Warlock slots refresh on a short rest, not a long rest, which means you can use a 5th level Divine Smite up to 6 times before you're forced to long rest at max level. At level 12, I was able to hit for up to 81 damage on a Divine Smite without any other damage buffs active, and up to double that on a critical hit. And you can smite twice in a single turn, meaning with some lucky rolls, you can take down some big enemies in a single turn. Outside of the ability to nuke things with your Smite, you also have a few lay on hands heals as a Paladin which can help out in a tough situation, and as a 10th level Warlock, you have a very powerful Eldritch Blast, which can be used to get off some good damage when you're out of range and while you're closing the distance. And to top it all off, your combat on this build will be powered by Charisma, which means you have amazing rolls on speech checks and you're never going to miss out on anything secret hidden behind persuasion rolls. To start off this character, I'm actually going to recommend that you just play a straight up Oath of Vengeance Paladin build until level 6, and then ultimately at level 7, right at the beginning of Act 2, you can do a respec of your character to go into the full Warlock Paladin multiclass. The reason I recommend this is because multiclass builds tend to struggle more in the early game, and with this build, if you committed right from level 1, you won't end up getting an extra attack until level 7, which is delaying your mid-game power spike by quite a bit. By rolling a Paladin until level 6, you get your extra attack and some very useful extra HP and healing to get you through that early game. And then at level 7, you can reset your character and get the full benefits of the multiclass build without having to suffer in the early game. For your starting ability scores as a Paladin, you want to focus on Strength and Constitution since you're not really going to get your Charisma benefits with this build anyway. Use your bonus points to get Strength to 17 and get Constitution to 16, and then put the remaining points in Dexterity for extra armor class before you can get Heavy Armor, or Wisdom for saving throws. Don't stress too much about these levels since we will be respecking at level 7 anyways, and we'll be dropping all of our points from Strength and Dex to become totally Charisma focused. Now once you hit level 7, you can finally start to get this build going, and you'll start with a respec using Withers at your campsite. At level 1, you want to drop all of your points in Strength and most of your points out of Dexterity. You'll likely have Heavy Armor by the time you're level 7, and your weapon will be scaling off of Charisma after this respec, so you can leave both of those stats at 8 or 10. Constitution should be pretty high, probably 16 points to make sure you have lots of HP. Personally, I do leave Intelligence at 8 points, then I have Wisdom at 14 for the saving throw bonus. And then Charisma will be our main stat, and you want it set at 17 at level 1, which will eventually bump up to 20. For levels 1 and 2 on this respec, you'll just be taking the Paladin class in order to get Heavy Armor proficiency, Lay on Hands, and importantly, Divine Smite at level 2, which is what lets you add your damage to your melee attacks by consuming spell slots. For the subclass, I think Oath of Vengeance is the one that fits best here, giving you a bonus action that can add even more damage to your melee hits, and Hunter's Mark, which also adds more damage. For the Paladin fighting style, I recommend great weapon fighting on this build. The goal is to pack as much damage as possible onto a single swing, so you want a big weapon, preferably a greatsword or something similar. At level 3, you're going to swap into the Warlock class, and basically remain here for the last 10 levels all the way until the end of the game. At level 1 Warlock, make sure you pick up the Eldritch Blast cantrip. This will add a very reliable source of range damage for your character that scales with your Warlock levels, eventually giving you 3 Eldritch Blasts per turn. For your second cantrip, I highly recommend Friends, which allows you to have free advantage rolls on any speech check, making it even easier to breeze through conversations. For your subclass, I think the Great Old One is a pretty good fit for this build since it gives you the ability to frighten enemies when you score a critical hit, but you can also take the Fiend subclass, which gets you some lifesteal every single time you take out an enemy. At Warlock level 2, you start picking your Eldritch Invocations. Definitely take Agonizing Blast to increase your Eldritch Blast damage, and then I settled for Devil's Sight, which makes you impossible to blind with darkness spells. With this setup, you can even cast darkness onto a crowd of enemies and then jump in to attack them and take no penalties. For your spells, I would really say that it's up to you and what you want to pick. Since the entire point of this build is to just use those spell slots with Divine Smite in every single combat and then short rest afterwards to reset them, you generally won't be using your Warlock spell slots for anything else unless it's an emergency. At level 3 Warlock, you want to choose the Pact of the Blade for this build, which allows you to bind your weapon with Warlock magic and make it use Charisma for all of its stat bonuses, not Strength or Dex, meaning your high Charisma score is about to start making you a melee combat god. At Warlock level 4, you get some new spells, a new cantrip, and most importantly, a feat which you can use to put into an ability score increase. Put both of these points into Charisma, getting you up to 19 points, one away from the default max of 20. Now the trick here is to try and make sure that you say yes to the offer made by Auntie Ethel the Swamp Hag when you fight her in Act 1. By letting her go free, you can choose to get a permanent +1 to any ability score, which means you can bump your Charisma to 20 and then have a +5 bonus to all your speech checks and combat rolls for the rest of the game, which is pretty huge for this build. Now comes the big one, level 7, where you can finally combine your 2 levels of Paladin with the 5th level of Warlock, which, as a Pact of the Blade Warlock, unlocks a second attack with your melee weapon every single round. And importantly, you also now get access to level 3 spell slots. Your Divine Smite adds 1d8 damage per spell level, and you can attack twice per turn, meaning you can blow both of your high-level Warlock spell slots in a single round to absolutely nuke any one target for extremely high damage. Then, after you smite down whatever enemies you were fighting, you just hit a short rest, regain both spell slots, and do it all over again in the next fight. In addition, you'll have at least 2 Paladin spell slots which can be used to cast Hunter's Mark or Hex for extra damage, or to just spend on lower damage Smites. You also have a couple Lay on Hands heals for some free healing, so this setup actually winds up being quite durable, and it's able to easily run into the front lines in combat, smash down the strongest enemy, and not really worry about getting hit. For the rest of your character levels, the easiest thing to do is just pump them all into Warlock, which will continue upgrading your spell slot levels, and each time your spell slot levels up, you gain even more damage on Smite. At level 10, you gain another feat, and you don't need anything specific for this build. But if you want my advice, you can take Savage Attacker or Great Weapon Master to add damage onto your non-smiting attacks, so you can keep up the pain even after your 2 spell slots are gone. At level 11, with level 9 Warlock, you will unlock 5th level spell slots, which is the highest you can go with this build in Baldur's Gate, just because of the level cap. At this point, your Smite can be hitting as high as 80 to 90 or more damage depending on your weapon, your damage buffs, and how well you roll. And finally, at level 12, you gain a unique Warlock trait that's different for each subclass. As a Great Old One Warlock, you become immune to psychic damage and reflect it back at enemies. But as a Fiend Warlock, you gain the ability to become resistant to any one type of damage, which can be changed every time you short rest, so it's a pretty handy little bonus. Both of these are very solid options that work quite well for this build. The Old One subclass is a bit more offensive, and the Fiend subclass is a bit more defensive, so really it's up to you and how you want to play the character. At the end of the day, I do feel like this build is a bit of a one-trick pony in combat. While you do technically have access to some amazing spells by the time you hit high level, just blowing those Warlock spell slots on Divine Smite every single round is going to honestly net you way more damage than using any of the spells you have, so it's kind of a catch-22. But if you can lean into that and ignore the damage dealing spells you have access to, instead picking utility spells and things that can save you in an emergency, You can then have some really clutch tools at your disposal, alongside Divine Smite. I will say that I had more fun overall playing my Warlock Fighter multiclass because it felt like all of my abilities were pretty much equal in power and I wasn't just locked into doing one thing all the time. But I will also say that it was very, very satisfying to just dumpster enemies with like 70 HP in a single hit using Divine Smite. And I was pretty surprised at how easily you could take down bosses with this build. That pretty much covers it for this one though, so I hope you enjoyed, and let me know how this build works out for you if you decide to try it. Thanks for checking out the video. I've got links to my Twitch stream and Discord server down below for anyone interested. And until next time, stay safe out there, everyone.